The Vampire King's voice cut through the throne room like a blade through silk. No. One word. That's all it took to shatter Lady Seraphina Ashford's dreams of becoming queen. If you want to hear more stories like this, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from right now. Alara Thorne pressed herself deeper into the shadows behind the marble pillar, clutching the silver tray that had given her an excuse to be in the grand hall during the presentation ceremony. She'd watched this scene unfold 99 times before. Noble daughters in gowns worth more than Alara would earn in 10 lifetimes, parading before King Lucian Draven like precious gems on display, only to be dismissed with that same cold, final word. Your Majesty, surely you can't be serious. Lady Seraphina's voice trembled with barely contained fury. Her crimson gown, selected to complement her porcelain skin and dark hair, suddenly looked garish in the candlelight. My bloodline traces back to the first families. My father controls the Eastern Territories. I am educated, accomplished, beautiful, and utterly predictable. King Lucian rose from his throne with the fluid grace that came from 5 centuries of existence. He was magnificent in black velvet and silver trim, his dark hair pulled back to reveal features that could have been carved from marble, sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, lips that suggested cruelty and sensuality in equal measure. But it was his eyes that truly unsettled, amber shot through with crimson, ancient and knowing, holding the weight of centuries. Predictable? Seraphina's face flushed with humiliation. Around them, the court held its collective breath. 200 vampires in their finest attire, all witnessing the 100th rejection. You want power, not partnership. You see a crown, not a person. You've rehearsed every word, every gesture, every expression to maximize your appeal. Lucian descended the dais steps. You're beautiful, yes, but beauty without authenticity is merely decoration. I have enough decoration. Then what do you want? The question burst from Seraphina like a wound breaking open. Lucian's gaze swept the throne room, past the nobles in their jewels and silks, past the Lord Chancellor whose disapproval radiated like heat, past the musicians frozen in place. His eyes caught on the shadows near the eastern pillar. On Alara. She froze. Her heart, that traitorous, too loud organ, hammered against her ribs. Kings didn't look at servants. Kings didn't see servants. They were furniture, atmosphere, functionaries who existed to make noble life comfortable and then disappeared. But Lucian was looking at her. Really looking. Those amber-red eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made breathing difficult. He moved toward her. Not quickly. He didn't need speed to command attention. Every step was deliberate, predatory, mesmerizing. The crowd parted like water before him. Seraphina's protests faded to white noise. You. His voice was softer now, but it carried through the sudden silence. Step forward. Alara's legs wouldn't move. Couldn't move. This was a nightmare. She'd be punished for catching the king's attention during a ceremony. Servants who drew notice were always punished. I said, forward. Not angry, curious. Somehow her feet obeyed, carrying her from shadow into candlelight. Her gray servant's dress, simple wool, patched at the elbows, hem stained from kitchen work, looked obscene among the silks and velvets. She kept her eyes down, as trained, hands clasped around the tray so tightly her knuckles went white. Look at me. It was a command. Commands from vampire nobility couldn't be ignored. Slowly, she raised her eyes to meet his. The world tilted. Up close, Lucian Draven was overwhelming. Not just his physical presence, though that was considerable, but something else. Power, yes, but also exhaustion. Loneliness. A desperate, searching quality that mirrored something deep in her own chest. What's your name? Alara Thorne, Your Majesty. Her voice came out steady. Small miracle. How long have you worked in the palace, Alara Thorne? 4 years, Your Majesty, since I was 18. And in those 4 years, how many of these ceremonies have you witnessed? She hesitated. Honesty could be dangerous, but lying to the Vampire King was death. All of them, Your Majesty. I've seen you reject 99 candidates. A smile ghosted across his lips, brief, genuine, transforming his face from intimidating to devastating. And what did you think of them? The noble daughters with their rehearsed speeches and strategic beauty? The entire court was listening. Every word would be repeated, analyzed, weaponized. But Lucian's eyes held hers, and something in them demanded truth. I thought they were very beautiful, Your Majesty. Very accomplished. That's not what I asked. Elara took a breath. I thought they didn't see you. They saw a crown. A throne. Power they could wear like jewelry. But they didn't see the person wearing the crown. Silence crashed through the throne room like thunder. Lucian's hand lifted, and Elara flinched. Reflex from 4 years of ducking noble ladies' slaps. But his fingers merely brushed her cheek, gentle as snow. You're mine, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, clear enough that there could be no misunderstanding. My choice. My queen. The court erupted, and Elara's world shattered into pieces she'd never be able to put back together. The throne room descended into chaos. Nobles shouted over each other, their voices climbing into shrill crescendos of disbelief and outrage. Lady Seraphina stood frozen, her face cycling through shock, humiliation, and murderous rage. The Lord Chancellor, ancient, severe, draped in ceremonial robes, pushed through the crowd toward the dais. Your Majesty, this is madness. His voice boomed with the authority of 8 centuries serving the crown. You cannot choose a servant as your queen. The bloodline laws, the political alliances, the very foundation of our society, are precisely why I've rejected 100 noble daughters. Lucian's hand remained on Elara's shoulder, possessive and grounding. She stood paralyzed, certain that at any moment she'd wake in her narrow servant's bed and discover this was all a fever dream. I'm done with political marriages, done with alliances built on lies, done with women who see me as a stepping stone to power. But a servant! Duke Ashford, Seraphina's father, stepped forward, face purple with fury. Your Majesty, my daughter is descended from... I know her lineage. I know her dowry. I know exactly what strategic value she represents. Lucian's amber eyes swept the crowd with cold finality. And I don't care. Elara Thorne is my choice. She has no breeding, no education, no training in court politics or vampire society. A Countess Elara vaguely recognized from serving tea, shrieked from the crowd. She doesn't even know which fork to use at formal dinners. Then she'll learn. Lucian turned to the guards flanking the throne. Escort Miss Thorne to the royal wing, the Queen's chambers. Have the staff prepare everything she needs. Your Majesty, no. Elara finally found her voice, though it came out as a terrified whisper. This is a mistake. I'm nobody. I'm just... You're exactly what I've been searching for. His voice softened. But only for her. Trust me, Elara. Please. The guards approached, not threatening, but inevitable. One reached for her arm, and she flinched hard enough that the silver tray clattered to the marble floor with a sound like breaking bones. I'll go with her. Lucian's tone shifted back to command. The rest of you are dismissed. Lord Chancellor, we'll discuss this in my study tomorrow evening. Lady Seraphina, you and your family will leave the palace immediately. You'll regret this, Seraphina hissed, her composure finally shattering completely. Everyone will know you chose a serving girl over me. Over all of us. The humiliation is yours, not mine. Lucian's hand dropped from Elara's shoulder. Guards, see the Ashford family to their carriages. The walk through the palace corridors felt like a death march. Elara's legs moved automatically, following Lucian through hallways she'd only ever entered to clean or deliver meals. Other servants pressed themselves against walls as they passed, eyes wide with shock and something else. Resentment, perhaps, or fear of association. Your Majesty. Elara tried again when they'd left the throne room chaos behind. I don't understand. Why would you do this? I'm nobody. I have nothing to offer. Do you know why I rejected 100 noble daughters? Lucian stopped before ornate double doors carved with silver roses. The Queen's chambers. Elara had cleaned these rooms exactly twice, both times under strict supervision. Because every single one of them lied to me. Lied? They said they wanted me. They swore devotion, promised love, claimed they'd support my reign. His laugh was bitter, but their eyes betrayed them. They looked at my crown, my throne, my power, never at me. He pushed open the doors, revealing a suite larger than the entire servants' dormitory. Silk curtains, velvet furniture, a bed that could sleep 5 people comfortably. Luxury Alara couldn't even name. You didn't lie, Lucian continued. When I asked what you thought of the candidates, you told me the truth even though it could have gotten you killed. You saw me, the person beneath the crown. Do you have any idea how rare that is? But I'm not. I can't. Alara gestured helplessly at the opulent room. Your Majesty, I don't belong here. This is punishment. It has to be. You're going to let me fail. Let them mock me and then nothing. He moved closer, and she instinctively stepped back until her shoulders hit the wall. Not threatening, just intense, overwhelming, too much. This isn't punishment, Alara. This is choice. My choice. And if you'll allow it, yours as well. I don't have a choice. You're the king. You always have a choice. His hand rose, palm pressed against the wall beside her head. Stay. Let me show you that authenticity matters more than bloodlines. Or leave. Return to the servants' quarters. I won't force you. Alara looked into those ancient amber eyes and saw something she recognized. Loneliness. Soul-deep, centuries-old loneliness that mirrored her own. If I stay, she whispered, they'll destroy me. If you stay, Lucian corrected, I'll make sure they can't. And despite every logical reason to run, Alara found herself nodding. The first morning in the Queen's chambers, Alara woke to find 6 noble ladies standing at the foot of her bed. She jolted upright, heart slamming against her ribs, instinctively pulling the silk sheets, softer than anything she'd ever touched, up to her chin. The ladies watched her with expressions ranging from barely concealed contempt to cold amusement. Lady Seraphina stood at their center, wearing a smile sharp enough to draw blood. Good morning, Your Highness. The title dripped with venom. We've come to help you prepare for court. After all, you'll need considerable assistance to avoid embarrassing yourself, and our king, further than you already have. Alara's throat tightened. She recognized these women. Countess Marina, who'd once slapped her for serving lukewarm tea. Lady Isolda, who'd had a servant girl dismissed for making eye contact. Baroness Thalia, whose cruelty was whispered about in the servants' quarters. Thank you, but I can dress myself. Can you? Seraphina moved closer, circling the bed like a predator. Do you know the difference between morning court attire and evening formal wear? Can you identify which jewels are appropriate for a queen versus those meant for lesser nobility? Do you even know how to walk in heels without stumbling like a common tavern wench? Each question landed like a slap, because the answer to all of them was no. I didn't think so. Seraphina's smile widened. Come, we'll make you presentable. Though I suspect even magic couldn't transform a servant into royalty. The next 3 hours were torture disguised as assistance. They dressed her in a gown so tight she could barely breathe, then criticized how it fit her unfortunate figure. They arranged her hair in an elaborate style that pulled painfully at her scalp, commenting on how common her natural texture was. They painted her face with cosmetics, discussing her plain features, as if she weren't sitting right there. At least she has decent skin, Isolde said, applying rouge with unnecessary force. For a human who spent years scrubbing floors. The king must have been bewitched, Marina added. There's no other explanation. Perhaps we should consult the court sorcerers about magical interference. Alara endured it silently, as she'd endured 4 years of serving these women. But something had changed. She was no longer obligated to accept their cruelty without response. The realization hit her like dawn breaking. That's enough. Her voice came out stronger than expected. All of you can leave now. Seraphina laughed. Excuse me? I said leave. Thank you for your assistance, but I'll finish preparing alone. You don't give us orders, girl. Seraphina leaned close enough that Alara could smell her expensive perfume. You might be wearing silk now, but we all know what you really are. A nobody playing dress-up. And when the king tires of his little experiment, and he will, you'll be back in the kitchens where you belong. If you're lucky. They left in a rustle of skirts and poisonous laughter, slamming the doors hard enough to rattle the frames. Court that afternoon was worse. Every eye tracked Alara as she entered the reception hall on Lucian's arm. Nobles whispered behind fans and gloved hands. She'd been taught to curtsy, but her unfamiliar heels made her wobble. Someone snickered. Her face burned. "Ignore them," Lucian murmured, his hand steady at the small of her back. "They fear change. You represent everything that threatens their comfortable hierarchy." But ignoring them proved impossible when Lady Isolde accidentally spilled wine on Alara's gown. When Baron Aldrich asked if she could read, then acted shocked when she said yes. When Countess Marina questioned whether someone of such humble origins even understood basic etiquette, the servants were worse. Her former colleagues treated her with icy silence or fearful deference, both equally painful. Rowan, her closest friend, wouldn't meet her eyes when bringing refreshments. The kitchen staff whispered that she'd seduced the king through manipulation or dark magic. Nobody believed Lucian had simply chosen her. That evening, Alara stood alone on her balcony, fighting tears, when Lucian appeared. "I can't do this," she said without turning. "They're right. I don't belong here." "They're afraid." He joined her at the railing. For centuries, bloodline determined everything. Power, status, worth. You challenge that entire system simply by existing in these chambers. Why? The question burst from her. Why choose me? Why subject yourself to this scandal for a servant girl you don't even know? Lucian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried 5 centuries of loneliness. Because I've spent 100 presentations watching women lie to my face, watching them see a crown instead of a person, watching them perform devotion they didn't feel. He turned to her. "And then I saw you in the shadows, believing no one noticed you. And your eyes held something real. Pain. Observation. Truth. You saw me, Alara. Not the king, me. I still don't understand vampire society. Their politics, their rules. Then I'll teach you." He offered his hand. "Starting tonight, if you'll trust me." Alara looked at his outstretched hand. Pale, elegant, powerful enough to crush stone, yet extended with infinite gentleness. She thought of Serafina's cruelty, the noble's mockery, the impossible task ahead, and she took his hand anyway. The spring solstice celebration filled the grand ballroom with hundreds of vampires dressed in their finest. Silks that shimmered like starlight, jewels that caught candlelight and threw rainbows across marble floors. Alara stood beside Lucian's throne, wearing a gown of midnight blue that he'd personally selected, trying not to feel like an imposter among creatures who'd lived centuries. "You're doing well," Lucian murmured, his hand finding hers beneath the armrest where no one could see. 3 weeks of intensive tutoring had taught her court etiquette, vampire history, and the complex web of noble families. She still felt hopelessly out of her depth, but she'd learned to hide it better. "Lady Thorne." Lord Chancellor Matthias approached with a crystal goblet balanced on a silver tray. Despite his initial opposition, he'd begun treating Alara with grudging respect after she'd corrected his Latin translation during a council meeting. "The staff prepared this specifically for you. Spiced wine with herbs to warm human blood. A traditional solstice drink." The gesture felt significant. Acceptance, perhaps, or at least acknowledgement of her presence. Alara took the goblet with a grateful smile. "Thank you, Lord Chancellor." She raised it to her lips. Lucian's hand shot out, knocking the goblet from her grasp. Crystal shattered against marble. Deep red wine spread across white stone like arterial blood. The ballroom fell silent. "Your Majesty?" Matthias looked genuinely confused. "I don't understand. The scent." Lucian was already on his feet, amber eyes blazing crimson with fury. "Nightshade. Belladonna. Enough to kill a human in minutes." His gaze swept the room, landing on each noble with terrible precision. "Who prepared this drink?" The temperature dropped. Alara's breath came out in visible puffs. Around them, vampires backed away from the king's rage, ancient, primal, barely controlled. "The kitchens, Your Majesty," Matthias stammered, "but I watched them prepare it myself. There was nothing. Someone added poison after it left your sight." Lucian's voice could have cut diamond. Guards, lock down the palace. No one leaves until we find who's responsible. Alara's hands trembled. She'd been seconds from drinking death. If Lucian hadn't noticed, if his vampire senses hadn't caught the subtle scent of poison beneath spiced wine, "I need to sit down," she whispered. Lucian was beside her instantly, guiding her to the throne with infinite gentleness that contrasted sharply with the fury still radiating from him. "Breathe. You're safe. I won't let anyone hurt you." But her vision was already darkening at the edges. Shock, maybe. Or the small amount of poison that had touched her lips before Lucian knocked the goblet away. "She's been exposed." Matthias's voice came from very far away. "The contact alone." "I know." Lucian's wrist was suddenly at her mouth, bleeding from where he'd bitten it open. "Drink, Alara. My blood will neutralize the poison." "I can't." Human taboos about drinking blood warred with survival instinct. "You can. You must. Trust me." She did. Gods help her, she did. His blood was nothing like she'd imagined. Not copper or salt, but something richer, darker, tinged with power that sang through her veins like lightning. The moment it touched her tongue, the darkness receded. Her vision cleared, and something else happened. Something she wasn't prepared for. She felt him. His emotions crashed into her consciousness like waves. Fury at the assassination attempt, terror at how close he'd come to losing her, and beneath it all, something deeper, loneliness that stretched back centuries, hope that felt fragile as spun glass, and affection, growing stronger each day, directed entirely at her. Lucian gasped, pulling his wrist away. "The bond. I didn't think." He stared at her with wonder and alarm. "Can you feel it? Your emotions?" "Yes." Her voice shook. "You can feel mine?" He nodded slowly. "The blood creates a temporary connection. It will fade in a few days. But until then," he touched her face, "until then, we'll be unable to hide from each other." The investigation took 3 hours. Guards questioned every servant who'd been near the kitchens. Vincent, summoned from the Eastern Territories, used old magic to trace the poison's origin, and eventually, the truth emerged. Lady Seraphina had bribed a kitchen worker to add nightshade after the Lord Chancellor had inspected the wine. The servant confessed under magical compulsion, weeping and begging for mercy. They found Seraphina in her guest chambers, packing to flee. "You tried to murder her." Lucian's voice was quieter than Alara had ever heard it, which somehow made it more terrifying. "You poisoned a drink meant for my chosen queen." "She's not a queen!" Seraphina shrieked. "She's a servant playing dress-up. You humiliated me, humiliated my entire family, for a nobody. And now, your family will pay the price." Lucian's eyes blazed. "The Ashford lands are seized. Your titles are revoked. You and your entire bloodline are banished from the Northern Realm. If any of you return, the sentence is death." Seraphina's face went white. "You can't. My father's territories belong to the crown now." Lucian stepped closer. "Let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks they can harm what's mine. Ilara Thorne is under my protection. Threatening her means threatening me, and I do not forgive." Guards dragged Seraphina away, her screams echoing through the halls. Later, when the palace had finally quieted, Alara stood in her chambers with Lucian, still feeling his emotions through the blood bond. Satisfaction at delivering justice, lingering fear for her safety, and that growing affection that made her heart race. "You destroyed an entire noble family for me," she whispered. "I would destroy 1,000 noble families to keep you safe." He took her hand. "Do you understand now? You're not just some experiment, Alara. You matter. To the kingdom. To me." Through the bond, she felt the truth of his words burning bright as stars. The blood bond didn't fade in a few days as Lucian had promised. It lingered, a constant thread connecting Alara's consciousness to his, humming with emotions that weren't her own. She felt his presence like a second heartbeat, steady and ancient, thrumming with power that had accumulated over 5 centuries. At first, it was overwhelming. She'd be eating breakfast and suddenly feel his frustration during a council meeting 3 floors away. She'd be studying etiquette and experience his amusement at her concentration. Once, during a particularly boring court function, she'd felt his desire so intensely she'd nearly dropped her wine glass. "I'm sorry," Lucian said that evening when they were alone in the library, the one place they could escape court scrutiny. "I'm trying to control it, but the bond amplifies everything, especially when I'm near you." "I don't mind." The admission surprised her. "It's honest. You can't lie to me through the bond. I know exactly what you're feeling." "And what am I feeling now?" Elara closed her eyes, focusing on the thread between them. Affection, warm and growing stronger. Curiosity about what she was thinking. And beneath it all, that bottomless loneliness she'd sensed the first night. Centuries of isolation that no amount of power or conquest could fill. "You're lonely," she whispered. "You have been for so long you've forgotten what connection feels like." His expression shifted. Surprise, then something rawer. "The bond goes both ways, Elara. I feel you too. Your fear that you're not good enough. Your determination to prove yourself worthy. Your kindness that you hide because the world taught you it was weakness." He moved closer. "And something else. Something that grows stronger each day." She knew what he meant, because she felt it too. Attraction that went beyond physical. Connection that transcended the impossible divide between servant and king, human and vampire. Through the bond, she experienced his perspective. How he'd watched her for weeks before choosing her. Noticing small acts of kindness toward other servants. How she'd refused to become bitter despite her circumstances. How her eyes held intelligence that noble daughters hid beneath vapid smiles. "Tell me about your loneliness," she asked. Not as king, as Lucian. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. "I was 23 when I was turned. A soldier who made the mistake of impressing the wrong vampire on a battlefield. She transformed me without consent, used me for 3 decades, then abandoned me when I became inconvenient." Through the bond, Elara felt the echo of that ancient pain. Betrayal, rage, the horror of waking into immortality unprepared. "I spent the next century learning to survive in a world that saw me as a monster, built power because power meant safety, became king because it was better to rule than be ruled." He looked at her. "But somewhere in those 5 centuries I forgot how to feel, how to connect. Every relationship was transactional. Alliances, political marriages, lovers who wanted my power, not me. Until you saw a servant girl in the shadows. Until I saw you, looking at me like I was a person instead of a crown. And for the first time in 500 years I felt seen." Elara reached for his hand. Through the bond, she sent what she was feeling. Not pity, but understanding. Her own loneliness as an orphan working herself to exhaustion. The isolation of being invisible to everyone who mattered. The desperate hunger for genuine connection. Their emotions twined together through the bond, creating something new. Recognition. Acceptance. The beginning of something that felt like love. "This is dangerous," Lucian whispered. "I'm a vampire king. You're human. There are rules, expectations, political consequences. I don't care about rules." Elara surprised herself with the vehemence. "For 22 years I followed every rule, stayed invisible, accepted my place, and it left me empty. Then you chose me, and suddenly I'm alive. I feel things I didn't know I could feel. I matter in ways I never dared imagine. You've always mattered. The world was just too blind to see it." Through the bond, his emotions blazed. Desire, yes, but also respect, admiration, and that growing affection that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. They sat together in the library as night deepened outside, hands clasped, souls connected through vampire blood, and something far more powerful. The recognition of 2 lonely people who'd finally found each other across an impossible divide. The Vampire Council arrived on a moonless night, their carriages bearing the ancient seal of the 5 founding bloodlines. 12 vampires who'd ruled before Lucian was even born, whose combined age exceeded 10,000 years, descended upon the palace with the weight of tradition and law behind them. Elara watched from the gallery as they assembled in the throne room, ancient creatures in ceremonial robes, faces carved from centuries of wielding absolute authority. Lord Chancellor Matthias stood beside Lucian's throne, expression grim. This wasn't a courtesy visit. This was judgment. King Lucian Draven. The eldest counselor, Lady Morgana, spoke with a voice like grinding stone. She'd witnessed the fall of Rome, the rise of Christianity, the birth of nations. We come regarding your unconventional choice of queen. Through the blood bond, still strong after 3 weeks, Ilara felt Lucian's anger spike, then carefully suppress itself. My choice is my own to make. Not according to the covenant. A second counselor, Lord Brennus, unrolled an ancient scroll. Article 7, Section 3. The vampire king must marry within noble bloodlines to maintain purity of succession and political stability. No exceptions have been made in 2,000 years. Then perhaps it's time for change. Lucian's voice was dangerously calm. Change? Lady Morgana's laugh was cruel. You would overturn millennia of tradition for a human servant? A girl with no power, no bloodline, no understanding of our ways? Ilara felt the words like physical blows. Every insecurity she'd fought to overcome came rushing back. They were right. She had nothing to offer except her heart, and that wasn't enough to challenge 2,000 years of vampire law. She understands more than any noble daughter I've met, Lucian said coldly. She sees beyond power to the person. She offers authenticity in a world of beautiful lies, sentiment. Brennus waved a dismissive hand. Irrelevant to matters of state. Your queen must forge alliances, command respect from ancient families, produce heirs of appropriate bloodline. Ilara can do all of that. She's human. Morgana's contempt dripped like poison. Temporary, weak, mortal. You would bind our kingdom to a queen who will age and die within decades, who cannot even defend herself without your protection. Through the bond, Ilara felt Lucian's fury. Hot and barely controlled, but she also felt something else. His certainty. His absolute conviction that she was worth fighting for. The council offers you a choice, King Lucian. Brennus stepped forward. Renounce your claim on this servant girl. Choose a noble bride from the candidates we've approved. Daughters of the first families, blood pure and politically valuable. Do this, and we'll overlook this. Lapse in judgment. And if I refuse? Silence fell like a guillotine blade. Then we invoke Article 12, Morgana said quietly. The right of challenge. Any council member may contest your fitness to rule. Should you lose, you forfeit the crown and all territories. The northern realm will be divided among the victors. Ilara's breath caught. They were threatening to destroy everything Lucian had built. 5 centuries of maintaining peace, protecting his people, creating a stable kingdom, all because he'd chosen her. She couldn't let that happen. Your Majesty, Ilara's voice rang out from the gallery. Every head turned toward her. She descended the stairs, legs steady despite her terror. May I speak? Ilara, don't... Through the bond, she felt Lucian's panic. Please. She reached the throne room floor, facing the council directly. 12 ancient vampires who could kill her with a thought. I understand your concerns. You're right. I'm nobody. I have no bloodline, no power, no political value. She swallowed hard. That's why I'm withdrawing my claim. King Lucian should marry someone worthy of him. Someone who won't cost him his crown. No. Lucian was on his feet. Absolutely not. Your Majesty, please listen. I said no. He moved to her side, and through the bond his emotions blazed. Fury, desperation, love so fierce it nearly stopped her heart. You are not sacrificing yourself to save me from consequences I've chosen. You are not walking away because ancient vampires with outdated prejudices demand it. They'll take your crown. Let them try. Lucian turned to the council, pulling Ilara against his side. I reject your ultimatum. Ilara Thorne is my chosen queen. If you want to challenge that, invoke your Article 12. Call your right of challenge. But know this. I will fight every single one of you for the right to choose my own heart over your political games. The council chamber erupted in whispers. You would risk everything? Morgana's eyes narrowed. Your crown, your territories, your people's safety. All for a mortal girl? I would risk everything, Lucian said simply. For someone who sees me as more than a king. For someone real in a world of facades. For her, through the bond, Alara felt the truth burning in every word. Then so be it. Morgana's smile was cold. We invoke the trial of worth. Let your servant prove her value or lose everything you've built. The trial of worth hadn't been invoked in 3 centuries. Ancient vampire law dictated that when a king's choice was challenged, any candidate could compete through 3 tests designed to reveal true character, tests of intelligence, courage, and heart. The winner would become queen. The losers would leave with nothing but humiliation. Within 48 hours, the palace courtyard filled with noble daughters from across the realm. 23 vampires, each more beautiful and accomplished than the last, each furious that they had to compete against a human servant for a crown that should have been theirs by birthright. Alara stood among them, wearing the simple gray dress she'd requested. No jewels, no elaborate gown, just herself. The noble daughters glittered in silk and diamonds, their supernatural beauty making her feel plain and inadequate. Look at her, one whispered loud enough for Alara to hear. She actually thinks she can win. The human won't survive the first trial. Another laughed. The tests are designed for vampires. She'll break. Through the blood bond, Alara felt Lucian's concern radiating from where he stood on the palace steps beside the council. He couldn't help her. The rules forbade interference. She was alone in this. Lady Morgana raised her hand, and silence fell. The first trial tests intelligence and wit. You will enter the labyrinth of mirrors, an ancient maze where illusions reveal your deepest deceptions. Those who lie to themselves cannot find the exit. Those who face their own truth will emerge. You have until dawn. The labyrinth entrance yawned before them, carved stone descending into darkness. One by one, the candidates entered. Alara went last, stepping into shadow that swallowed light and sound. The passages twisted impossibly, mirrors reflecting versions of herself she didn't recognize. In one, she wore a crown and looked cruel. In another, she cowered in servant's rags, forever small. What do you truly want? A voice echoed, her own voice but distorted. Power? Status? Or are you just afraid of being invisible again? Other candidates' screams echoed through the stone. Some emerged quickly, having faced simple truths. Others didn't emerge at all, trapped by lies they couldn't acknowledge. Alara stood before a mirror that showed her greatest deception, the belief that she didn't deserve love, that Lucian's choice was a mistake, that she was fundamentally unworthy. No, she said aloud, I am worthy, not because of birth or status, but because I'm real, because I see him as a person, because love doesn't require perfection, only honesty. The mirror shattered. The exit appeared. She emerged 11th out of 23. 12 candidates remained trapped, forced to withdraw. The second trial came at midnight, a test of courage. Each candidate faced their deepest fear manifested by ancient magic. Vampires faced sunlight, fire, the loss of immortality. They screamed and failed, their supernatural strength useless against primal terror. When Alara's turn came, she entered a chamber that transformed into her worst nightmare. Not monsters or death, but insignificance. A vision of herself, invisible, unnoticed, unloved, her entire existence erased, as if she'd never mattered. I matter, she whispered, then louder. I matter, not because a king chose me, but because I choose to matter. My worth isn't determined by who sees me. It's intrinsic. It's mine. The vision shattered. She emerged 5th out of 11 remaining. The noble daughters who remained looked at her differently now, not with contempt, but with wary respect. This human servant was surviving trials designed to break vampires. The final trial, Lady Morgana announced as dawn approached, tests the heart. Each candidate will face a choice: power or love, crown or conscience. What you choose will reveal who you truly are. The remaining candidates were led to separate chambers. Alara's contained a single pedestal with 2 objects, a crown of silver and diamonds, and a simple wooden box. Choose. Morgana's voice echoed. The crown grants you queenship regardless of the trial's outcome. The box contains what you truly need, but costs you everything you want. Elara stared at the crown. It would end this. Give her status, safety, respect. Everything she'd never had. But through the blood bond, she felt Lucian. Not his desire for her to win, but his love. Unconditional. Real. She picked up the wooden box. Inside was a single note in Lucian's handwriting. You've already won. You chose truth over comfort, courage over safety, and love over power. That's what makes you queen. When she emerged, 10 other candidates stood holding crowns. Only Elara held a box, and only Elara was smiling. She chose wrong, Lady Isolde announced triumphantly, holding her crown aloft. The trial asked us to choose what would make us queen. I chose the crown. She chose a box of sentiment. The 10 noble daughters who'd selected crowns stood in a line, radiating satisfaction. Elara stood apart, clutching her wooden box, feeling foolish. Had she misunderstood? Had her heart betrayed her when strategy was required? The final trial, Lady Morgana said slowly, tests the heart. What you choose reveals who you are. She turned to the nobles holding crowns. You chose power over authenticity, status over truth. You saw a test and calculated the strategic answer. That's leadership. One candidate protested. A queen must think strategically. A queen must be authentic. Morgana's ancient eyes swept over them. Every one of you saw a choice and asked, what answer gets me what I want? You performed. You calculated. You played the game. She turned to Elara. She alone chose based on her values rather than desired outcome. She risked losing everything because her heart mattered more than winning. The courtyard fell silent. Elara Thorne passes the final trial. The rest of you have failed. Chaos erupted. The noble daughters shrieked protests, demanding recounts, accusing the council of bias. But Morgana's word was law, and one by one, they were escorted from the palace grounds, their humiliation complete. When they'd gone, only Elara remained standing before the council. Lucian moved to her side. The trial was over. He could finally touch her. Through the bond, his pride and relief flooded her senses. She passed your tests, Lucian said, voice tight with barely controlled emotion. All 3 trials. By ancient law, you must accept her. Not quite. Lord Brennus stepped forward, and Elara's heart sank. There's one final component we must address. The trials revealed her character. Admirable, we concede. But she remains human. Mortal. She'll age and die within decades while you remain unchanged. How can she rule beside you when time itself is her enemy? Elara felt the trap closing. They'd known this all along. Even passing the trials wouldn't be enough. Unless, Morgana said carefully, she were to be transformed. Become one of us. Then mortality would no longer be an obstacle. No, Elara's voice rang out before she could stop herself. I won't be forced into transformation to satisfy political requirements. Every vampire stared at her. Humans didn't refuse immortality. They begged for it. You would turn down eternal life? Brennus looked genuinely confused. Power beyond human limits? Centuries of existence? I would turn down being forced into it. Elara lifted her chin. Transformation is permanent, irreversible. If I become a vampire, it will be because I choose it freely. Not because a council demands it. Not because it's politically convenient. My choice. My body. My terms. Through the bond, she felt Lucian's fierce admiration. But if you remain human, Morgana pressed, you compromise the stability of the realm. Future heirs, succession, alliances built on bloodline. Then we'll build new alliances. Elara surprised herself with her boldness. Not based on ancient bloodlines, but on merit, character, and mutual respect. If vampire society is so fragile that one human queen destroys it, perhaps it deserves to be destroyed. The courtyard held its collective breath. Then, impossibly, Lady Morgana smiled. There it is. The fire we were testing for. She turned to the other council members. She doesn't just pass our trials. She challenges our fundamental assumptions. questions traditions we've held for millennia. That's not weakness. That's exactly what this kingdom needs. You were testing me still? Alara's voice shook. Even after the trials? We were testing whether you'd sacrifice your principles to win our approval. Morgana inclined her head in what might have been respect. You didn't. You stood your ground, risked losing everything, because your autonomy mattered more than our acceptance. That is queenship. Lord Brennus stepped forward, producing an ancient scroll. By the power vested in the Council of Five Bloodlines, we recognize Alara Thorne as worthy. She has passed the trial of worth. She may rule beside King Lucian Draven with all rights and privileges of vampire royalty, whether she chooses transformation or not. The scroll glowed with binding magic as Brennus spoke the words. Ancient law, sealed and unbreakable. Lucian pulled Alara against him, and through the bond, she felt everything. His love, his pride, his relief, his joy. You did it, he whispered. You magnificent, impossible woman. You did it. We did it, she corrected. Together. Around them, the palace guards knelt. The servants bowed. Even the ancient council members inclined their heads in acknowledgement. A servant had become a queen, not through bloodline or politics or strategic marriage, but through character, courage, and the refusal to compromise her truth for anyone's convenience. The vampire world would never be the same. The coronation was set for 3 weeks after the trial of worth ended. 3 weeks for the vampire world to process the impossible. A human servant would become queen. 3 weeks for Alara to learn what ruling actually meant. 3 weeks that felt like 3 lifetimes compressed into heartbeats. The palace transformed around her. Servants who'd once ignored her now bowed with genuine respect. Not fear, but recognition. Rowan, her old friend from the kitchens, finally approached her in the library. I'm sorry, Rowan said quietly, for avoiding you, for believing the rumors. I thought you'd used magic or manipulation, but then I watched the trials. You were just yourself, and that was enough. It's okay. Alara pulled her into a hug. I understand. Everything changed so fast. You're still you, though. That's what matters. Rowan pulled back, eyes bright. And now you can actually change things. Help people like us. The idea had been growing in Alara's mind for weeks. That night, she presented it to Lucian in his study. I want to establish schools, she said, spreading parchment across his desk. Rough sketches she'd drawn, ideas she'd compiled. Education for low-born vampires and humans who serve in vampire territories. Reading, mathematics, history. No one should be trapped by circumstance of birth. Lucian studied her plans, and through the blood bond, still strong despite the trial's ending, she felt his admiration. The nobles will resist. Education means power, and they've hoarded power for centuries. Let them resist. You're the king. I'll be queen. We have authority to make this happen. You've only been officially recognized for 2 weeks, and you're already planning to overturn the social order. His smile was proud and slightly amazed. I chose well. You chose authentically. Now help me build something authentic. They worked late into the night, planning reforms that would echo through generations. Protection for servants, fair wages, educational opportunities, legal recourse against noble cruelty. Each change challenged centuries of tradition, but Alara had learned something crucial during the trials. Tradition wasn't sacred just because it was old. Not all nobles resisted. Some, like Lord Chancellor Matthias, recognized that change was inevitable and chose to guide rather than obstruct. Others visited Alara privately, sharing stories of their own struggles within the rigid hierarchy, grateful someone was finally challenging it. But resistance remained. Anonymous threats appeared in her chambers. Whispered plots circulated through court. Some nobles refused to attend the upcoming coronation, while others attended specifically to witness what they hoped would be her failure. They're waiting for me to prove them right, Alara told Lucian one evening on her balcony. Waiting for me to fail, to show I don't belong, then prove them wrong. He pulled her close. Not by becoming what they expect, but by remaining exactly who you are. That's your power, Alara. Authenticity in a world of beautiful facades. The coronation dress arrived a week before the ceremony. Not the elaborate gown nobles expected, but something simpler. Silver silk that caught light like moon water, elegant but not ostentatious. A gown that said queen without screaming crown. "It's perfect," Alara whispered when she first saw it. "Like you," Lucian said simply. The blood bond had taught them communication beyond words. She felt his emotions constantly now. Pride in her accomplishments, desire that grew stronger each day, love that had deepened from initial attraction into something profound and unshakable. And he felt hers. Her lingering insecurity balanced by growing confidence, her fierce determination to deserve the trust he'd placed in her, her love that mirrored his own. The night before the coronation, they stood together in the royal gardens under stars that had witnessed 5 centuries of Lucian's reign and would witness centuries more. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted, "but also ready. I know who I am now, not despite being a servant, but including being a servant. Every struggle, every humiliation, every moment I felt invisible, it taught me empathy. It taught me to see people the system ignores. That's what I bring to this crown. Not bloodline, not politics. Humanity. And that," Lucian said, kissing her softly, "is exactly what this kingdom needs. Tomorrow she would be crowned. Tomorrow she would become Queen Alara Thorn, first of her name, breaker of tradition, champion of the forgotten. Tonight, she was simply Alara, a girl who dared to believe she mattered, and a king who'd seen her truth when everyone else saw only shadows. The throne room had never held so many witnesses. Vampires from across the realm filled every available space. Nobles in their ancient finery, representatives from territories that spanned continents, and for the first time in recorded history, servants and low-born vampires who'd been granted entry to witness their own ascending to power. Alara stood in the antechamber, hands trembling as attendants made final adjustments to her silver gown. Through the blood bond, she felt Lucian's steady presence in the throne room, his confidence, his pride, his absolute certainty that she belonged exactly where she was about to stand. "Ready?" Rowan appeared at her elbow, now officially appointed as her personal attendant. Another break from tradition that had scandalized the old families. "No," Alara admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." The doors opened. Every head turned. She walked the length of the throne room alone. Lucian had insisted on this. No one led her. No one presented her. She claimed her crown through her own steps, her own courage, her own choice. Some nobles watched with grudging respect, others with barely concealed contempt. The servants and low-born vampires watched with something else entirely. Hope. Proof that worth wasn't determined by birth, that the system they'd believed immutable could change. Lady Morgana stood beside the throne, holding a crown that had been forged specifically for Alara. Not the traditional queen's crown heavy with ancient jewels, but something simpler. Silver worked into delicate patterns that resembled both shadows and light, servant and sovereign intertwined. "Alara Thorn," Morgana's voice carried through the vast chamber. "You have passed the trial of worth. You have proven intelligence, courage, and heart. You have challenged our oldest traditions and emerged victorious not through birthright, but through character." She lifted the crown. "Do you accept the responsibilities of queenship? To rule with wisdom, to protect the vulnerable, to bridge the divide between classes, and to challenge injustice wherever it exists?" Traditional coronation vows asked about maintaining bloodline purity and upholding ancient laws. These vows, crafted specifically for Alara, demanded something different. Active compassion rather than passive tradition. "I do." Alara's voice didn't waver. "I accept all of it." The crown settled on her head, lighter than she'd expected, yet weighted with significance that had nothing to do with metal. "Then by the power vested in the Council of 5 bloodlines and the King's chosen right, I declare you Queen Alara Thorn, first of her name, breaker of chains, voice of the forgotten." The throne room erupted. Some applauded with genuine enthusiasm. Servants openly weeping with joy. Progressive nobles recognizing history being made. Others remained silent, arms crossed, faces set in disapproving lines. But even they couldn't deny what had just occurred. A human servant had become vampire queen. Lucian rose from his throne and crossed to her. In front of the entire court, he took her hand and kissed it with reverence that made her breath catch. "My queen," he said simply. And through the bond she felt everything, 5 centuries of loneliness ending, love that transcended species and status, fierce pride in the woman she'd become. The wedding ceremony followed immediately, another tradition shattered. Typically, coronation and marriage were separated by months of political negotiation. But Lucian had declared that his choice was made, his queen crowned, and he would wait not 1 day longer. Lord Chancellor Matthias performed the rites, his voice steady despite the unprecedented nature of what he was witnessing. "Do you, King Lucian Draven, take Queen Alara Thorn as your bonded partner, to rule beside her, to protect and cherish her, to build a kingdom that reflects both your strengths?" "I do. For eternity." "And do you, Queen Alara Thorn, take King Lucian Draven as your bonded partner, to rule beside him, to challenge and support him, to build a kingdom that honors authenticity over tradition?" "I do. For as long as I draw breath, and perhaps beyond." The caveat made some nobles shift uncomfortably. She still hadn't committed to transformation, still retained her humanity, still refused to conform completely. And that, Lucian had told her privately, was exactly why he loved her. When they kissed, sealing vows that would echo through centuries, the throne room divided perfectly. Half erupted in celebration, half maintained stony silence. But history had been made regardless of who approved. That evening, the first Queen's decree was announced, the establishment of Thorn Academies across the realm, offering education to any vampire or human regardless of birth or status. Funded by the crown, protected by royal decree, open to everyone. "You're changing everything," Lucian said, as they stood on the palace balcony, watching celebrations spread through the city below. Common folk dancing in streets, servants raising toasts to a queen who'd once served beside them. "We're changing everything," Alara corrected. "Together. A king who chose authenticity, and a queen who refused to forget where she came from." He pulled her close, and through the bond, their emotions intertwined. Hope for the future they'd build. Love that had conquered impossible odds, and the unshakable certainty that they'd chosen correctly. A servant had become queen, and the vampire world would never be the same. 6 months after the coronation, Queen Alara Thorn stood in what had once been an abandoned wing of the palace, and watched the first Thorn Academy officially open its doors. Children, both vampire and human, filed through the entrance in clean uniforms provided by the crown. Lowborn vampires who'd never been taught to read sat beside servants' children learning mathematics. Teachers recruited from across the realm prepared lessons that challenged rather than reinforced the old hierarchies. "You're smiling," Lucian said, appearing at her side with the silent grace that still occasionally startled her. "I'm watching the world change." She turned to him, and through the blood bond, permanent now, woven so deeply into their souls it would never fade, she felt his pride radiating like sunlight. 3 more academies open next month. By year's end, we'll have 20 across the northern realm. The conservative nobles are calling it educational insurrection. His amber eyes gleamed with amusement. They're not entirely wrong. 6 months had transformed more than just education. Alara's reforms rippled through vampire society like stones thrown into still water. Servant protection laws that made abuse punishable by exile. Fair wage requirements that nobles initially resisted, then grudgingly accepted. Legal representation for low-born vampires facing noble accusations. Each change challenged centuries of tradition, and each change bore her signature. "Lady Morgana visited yesterday," Alara said as they walked through the palace gardens. Autumn had painted the leaves gold and crimson, and she found herself appreciating the seasons with new intensity, knowing they were finite. "She said I'm the most disruptive force vampire society has experienced in a millennium." I think she meant it as a compliment. She definitely did. Lucian pulled her close. "You've accomplished in 6 months what others couldn't manage in centuries. You've made the kingdom better, Alara. More just, more honest, more human in the best sense of the word. They stopped at the overlook where they'd stood the night before her coronation. The city sprawled below them, lights beginning to flicker as evening approached. 6 months ago, this view had terrified her. Now it felt like home. "I've been thinking about the future," Alara said carefully. "Our future." Through the bond, she felt his attention sharpen. "Tell me. When you chose me, I was human, mortal, temporary. I insisted on remaining that way because I needed to know my choices were mine, not dictated by political necessity." She took his hand. "But these past 6 months, I've built something here. Schools, laws, systems that will outlive me by decades. Except they shouldn't have to outlive me. Alara, I want forever, Lucian." The words came out stronger than she'd expected. "Not because anyone's forcing me. Not because tradition demands it. Because I've found my purpose here. And one human lifetime isn't enough to see it through. I want centuries to build this kingdom. Centuries with you." His emotions through the bond blazed. Hope, joy, love so fierce it nearly stopped her heart. "You're asking me to transform you? Eventually. Not today, maybe not this year. But soon, when I'm ready. When we're both ready." She stepped closer. "I want to watch our academies grow into universities. I want to see the children we're educating become leaders who build an even better world. I want forever to love you, challenge you, rule beside you." Lucian cupped her face with infinite gentleness. 500 years I waited. 500 years of loneliness, of going through the motions of existence without truly living. And then a servant girl looked at me from the shadows and saw a person instead of a crown. And a king chose authenticity over 100 noble daughters. She smiled through tears. "Best decision you ever made?" "Second best. The best is yet to come." He kissed her softly. "When you're ready, truly ready, I'll give you eternity. We'll build this kingdom together. Not for decades, but for centuries. Forever won't be long enough." They stood together as night fell over the realm. A king who'd learned to choose his heart, and a queen who'd risen from shadows to change the world. Behind them, the palace glowed with light. Below them, the city breathed with life. Humans and vampires learning to coexist. Old hierarchies crumbling, new possibilities emerging. "Forever," Alara whispered. "Forever," Lucian agreed. And in the space between heartbeats, one that would eventually stop beating and one that would beat eternally, they held each other and faced the future they'd chosen together. The vampire king who'd rejected 100 noble daughters and the servant girl he'd found